Well, let me see if I can set you up for your reading homework on July's People a little bit. This video will be at the bottom of the page I've made here. A short movie clip. Can't find the movie, but it has some good visuals. Gives you a sense of the violence in South Africa, a little bit of sense of the village at all as well. First of all, relax when you read this. Don't try to figure every little reference out. Just read and listen. The story's quite natural. It's like listening to a strange family's dinner table talk. Sometimes in real life, sometimes in memory. These people know each other. July and his former white employers, switching roles in South Africa, slowly shifting roles, that is, over the short time of the novel as the family becomes a guest in July's village compound. You don't have to get all of the references. There won't be a test. But you will write a paper, and if you listen intently, some of the scenes will hit you, strike a nerve. That's what I want you to do prior to Tuesday. So when we meet in class, I want you to have a handful of powerful scenes from the discs 1 and 2, about half the book, that you'd like to discuss with the class. You don't have to know everything, but just be able to tell us what struck you about the scenes. I think the book will open up quite naturally when we do that. And then after that, we'll work on this book all week in class. I think we'll get a good feel for it. And I'll post this video on this page in a short bit. Now, the way I went through the book, it's kind of simple, and I have an e-copy and a hard copy, so I use the e-copy for the purposes of this discussion. And, page 6, I highlight that. I like that because it's kind of a background to the history of violence in apartheid South Africa. And I moved to page 19 because July is explaining to his wife and family, they're angry. Why do these people live in our village? Why they had to get out. And so I like that. It gives a sense of the background. Of course, they counter, why does he have to get out? He has a gun. What does he need protection for? And the subtext there, as we find out later, Native Africans in South Africa weren't allowed to own guns. All that power was in the hands of the white minority that ruled the country. I suppose a gun activist might wake up to that. And I love this too, where the older woman is talking about he went overseas. She doesn't quite know how to say it. So it's not just the pronunciation, it's a concept for these African villagers. Somebody going to another country overseas? Unthinkable. So she catches the tone of the differences in their lives in little ways, struggling over a word that carries within it this alien life where people take jets to other countries. Very confusing to these villagers who don't own anything. So we just kind of walk through here. They're stunned. The old woman, somebody shot the white people. Oh my God, what will the white people do with us? That's all on page 20. She can't imagine her people who have been victimized doing anything violent, and then she worries what will happen to them. Really wonderful way of kind of weaving the different consciousness now of an elderly black woman in the village. Later on, some of our main characters. It's really cool that way. So, and that's what the book's about, is what are these people like? What are they thinking? So it's not about action. And this is when he takes the truck, and it's an important thing because we look at it just as taking the truck, but black South Africans weren't allowed to drive in the towns. And so taking the truck is actually taking control of something that was largely out of a South African's hands. And so you got to kind of watch it. It's and then a lot of arguments will come out of taking the truck too that kind of point back to that. And then we move into this long scene, page 30. It's her memory of her black friend who used to meet her. She was a servant at the house, and she would meet her after school and carry her books back. And it's a 2 or 3 page memory, but the fascinating thing is embedded in that simple memory is the fact that, oh, wait a minute, the white girl goes to school, the black girl stays home and cleans house. And then the image of them walking across the street with the black girl instinctively, like a good servant, carrying her white girlfriend's books on top of her head. So when you get to the end of that passage, and it says right here, did the book, placing the pair in its context, give the reason she and Lydia, in their infection and ignorance, didn't know how strange it was that this one girl was prepped up coming home from school, and her best girlfriend, the black girl, was out of the servants' quarters carrying her books home. Did they know, out of their ignorance, how society had pushed them each into these kind of inaugural, distant roles? So I love that scene. It's a beautiful scene, well worth looking at. And we keep cruising along a little bit here. This is kind of a 2-page thing, 35. It's kind of gross, actually. The kid wiping his butt with a rock, and then the paper along with the turd discussing to find shit-smeared scraps blowing about and being relished by the pigs. So it's pretty coarse, and so this is just one of those really lively, vibrant scenes. Like, you wouldn't see that in my middle-class neighborhood in Johannesburg. So it's kind of fascinating and disgusting at the same time, and funny too. And then every now and again, they'll pulse out from the radio, or sometimes too, when July goes off to the market, what's going on in the rest of the country where the violence is unfolding. So you're always reminded that they're trapped in this village. There's no way out for them, and they're really dependent upon July. That's not difficult to interpret, but it's just part of the story. And then we go, July again is July got the keys, and how does that happen? And then they kind of say he's in charge in the journey. They were on his ground here. In other words, he does the driving. He knows what's best. Whereas back in Johannesburg, July never drove. They drove for him. You might remember he would walk to and from his village from Johannesburg. And then the husband and wife have a kind of a touching fight here, and they're trying to speak to their decency. The wife is wondering, how come all the awful people are the ones who can speak the black languages, the racists, the nasty white people? And then the husband kind of tells her, well, that's how you get a job here. If you're going to be a boss, you have to speak their language. So they go back and fight forth, have a really good bit of an argument. And I think that's, it's just kind of touching. And it's also about, they're arguing over who's more decent in some ways. And a lot of that decency has to do with how they would treat black people. And then finally, there's a little bit of here's another thing that struck out here is, it's their only hope is that maybe after all this violence, it would be like some of the other countries that had suffered upheaval. Maybe some of them will come back. Maybe South Africa will come back in the way of the Congo, the Belgians, Rhodesians, which became Zimbabwe. So it's kind of a distant hope. They're still wondering, maybe we can re-enter society. Maybe we will never belong. Kind of an echo of the main character for Beethoven is 1/16 black. So it's 51. And July, little subtle things. He greets them at the hut, their hut, but now he doesn't knock on the door or anything. He kind of shows up in the doorway. And it's kind of like it's his ground. He doesn't need permission to say anything. And so they kind of note that difference. He's just kind of showing up. You're a guest at my house now. Here's your firewood. And it's just a subtle change. And this will, these changes will continue. And they'll realize just how diminished their stature is in the village. And July, learning how to drive, and Bam offers, well, why didn't I teach you how to drive? And I just reminded you, in town? And he laughs, the limits of his place. That is, a black person would not drive in Johannesburg, and Bam has to bring him back. No, no, here. Why didn't you let me teach you how to drive here? And kind of a fun thing, this is just an odd one about page 60. Oh, yeah, he's arguing that he's trying to explain to Bam and his wife, what would you tell the people out at the store 40 kilometers away if they ask you where you get the vehicle? And he says, they hear me. They must know if I tell them I take it from you. In other words, all he has to say is, I stole it from white people. And everybody will say, oh, okay, now we know how you got your truck. And so there's a, kind of an understanding that it's time to plunder. And I just think that's a fascinating little shorthand for just saying how not only is the law broken down, but it's perfectly fine to steal whatever you can. So that's why he says, they must know if I tell them I take it from you. Here's a fun argument about they built the water tower earlier on, or the water container, and some of the kids are saying, it's our water, and the grandmother, hearkening from thousands of years of time, says, who owns the rain? It's kind of an old and new culture clash. I like that little moment there. And as we move in here, this is a little bit subtle, page 65, is that it's kind of almost like a fugue, in that the white people make love this way, and the black people make love in these situations. And then the white people may have enough money to have a crane and they die. And then the old black woman just kind of, no plane there, but just getting older and older and sinking into the ground. So it's kind of the reach of their life, their love life, if you will, and they're living and dying. They all come to the ground, but some of them, the white people with money, may fall out of a private plane, and the old black woman might just carry one wood pile too many and disappear into the earth. It's kind of a poetic way of saying it. I really enjoy that. And so I'm just kind of talking you through some of these things, different passages. You can see the pages up here. And this is a great scene. I just want to look at it in class, page 69, 70, 71, and 72, even into 73. It's just a fascinating argument. It's subtle, but July's defiance and even irritation that the white people are actually, the wife is trying to tell him what to do, trying to speak to him on equal terms. It's something we have to look at again. I just love this passage, and I think it kind of shows in a strange way that the two are navigating what do we mean to each other now that the old order is gone, and what do we feel towards each other. So the masks are coming off. I really love it. Anyway, I hope this kind of walkthrough gives you an idea of the kind of discussion I hope we can have in class on Tuesday. Not too starchy and formal, but highlight a bunch of scenes that really hit a nerve for you from the first half of the book, and we'll go from there. And then on Wednesday, we'll move into Disc 3, and on Thursday, Disc 4, and along the way, we'll discuss how to write about it. I hope this helps you get oriented. Sorry about the length.